Tonight, the toll rises. Regional New South Wales records its first death as the virus spreads outside Sydney. Good evening, I'm Juanita Phillips. This is ABC News. Backpackers behaving badly. Pressure on the government to do more to enforce social distancing rules. Predictions: almost 250,000 Americans could die from the pandemic. And a teenager using his time in self-isolation to help others. More families are in mourning tonight, with the first death from coronavirus recorded in regional New South Wales. A patient believed to be an elderly woman died today at Orange Base Hospital. And a 95-year-old woman has become the 5th resident from the Dorothy Henderson Lodge in Sydney to succumb to the disease. The state's death toll is now 10, and the total number of cases is approaching 2,200. With fears that regional hospitals could be overrun, Sydney-siders are being urged to stay within city limits.
Little is known about the latest person to lose their life to coronavirus. The victim died today at Orange Base Hospital. The person was one of 8 cases in Orange and had been diagnosed before being admitted. The impact of coronavirus is being felt far and wide, and local councils want deserted holiday spots to stay that way.
The only reason why people should be travelling at Easter is if they're essential services that are going to a regional or rural area to back up the stressed essential services that are already there.
For some grey nomads, it's not that easy.
Our place is actually rented out, so the person has a very important job, so we're pleased about that. But we can't go back.
Case numbers in the state's regional health districts vary. A wedding cluster led to higher numbers in the south. There have been limited cases in the west and only one in the far west. Numbers are also low on the north coast, but cases in the Hunter New England Health District, centred on Newcastle, have grown to 218. 80% of cases in the district were acquired overseas, 50% aboard cruise ships. But the case rate has been falling in recent days.
We now have to be really on the lookout for cases that are occurring locally with no known source. Because we've only had small numbers of those cases, about a dozen.
The message is to stay home, but the cost to regional economies is huge. In the Hunter, the retail, hospitality and arts industries account for 1 in 5 jobs.
Even if we saw half of those jobs lost in those 3 sectors, we'd see the unemployment rate going up to 13%.
Dubbo enjoys high employment in mining and agriculture, but small business is suffering. The North Coast is grappling with huge job losses too.
We've got well over 2,000 staff in our licensed clubs. Well, guess what? They haven't got a job at the moment.
As regional businesses tally the economic fallout and look for government stimulus to steer them through, the hospitals are preparing for the battle of a lifetime. But a shortage of face masks has many on the front lines here very worried. Today, the Premier issued a call to arms.
I'm calling on the great people of our state, those great business people, those manufacturers who are able to retool, to consider retooling, to help supply those additional things we'll need in coming months.
Perhaps an opportunity amid the crisis. Ben Millington, ABC News, Newcastle.
3 people in New South Wales have become the first to be hit with $1,000 fines for breaching social distancing rules. And it appears that some backpackers in Bondi are continuing to disobey the rules, leading to fears that more clusters could emerge in the wider area. The ABC understands the state government is working on a new policy to target the young tourists. Here's crime reporter Mark Reddy.
Oceans away from home, but still too close for comfort.
Mad. They just truly don't understand.
This is where these backpackers live. It's unclear though whether this qualifies as a family household. If it does, then these travellers are exempt from the ban on gatherings of more than 2 people. Either way, neighbours are furious.
They don't seem to be social distancing at all. There's a lot of parties going on, a lot of noise, which is consistent for the hostel, but at a time like this, you'd think they'd pull it in a little bit.
Some hostels are moving to stop the spread of coronavirus.
We've just been trying to keep the ones that we had here safe, and not bring new people onto the property to protect basically us, my family, and all the guests staying here.
That's really good that they make it like that in the hostel, that we only stay together.
But that's not happening everywhere. Some hostels in Sydney are offering bargain prices to attract new guests. Not helping matters is the image of backpackers gathering on the street. Residents say backpackers have been holding parties at this inner city bus stop despite the new restrictions. The ABC's been told one woman was verbally abused when she asked them to stop. Many now fear this area could see a spike in coronavirus cases, similar to what's happened in Bondi. There, a pop-up clinic has been set up to deal with the state's biggest geographical cluster of COVID-19 cases.
The locals down here are being responsible, but international backpackers are not.
It doesn't leave much else for backpackers to do, and they probably should be going home.
Police efforts to enforce the new restrictions have been boosted by boots on the ground.
We will be glad to see the powers go when the virus has reached the point where we can get back to some sense of normality.
When that will be is anyone's guess. Mark Reddy, ABC News, Sydney.
Health authorities say there are more encouraging signs that the coronavirus curve could be flattening in Australia. But while the social distancing measures may be having an impact, there are warnings that the worst is yet to come for the health system. Here's Casey Briggs with a look at what the latest numbers tell us.
We've now recorded almost 4,900 confirmed cases of coronavirus around the country. Today, an increase of 330, almost half of those in New South Wales. Also today, 2 new deaths were recorded, both in New South Wales, one of them a resident of the Dorothy Henderson Lodge. It takes the total number of deaths across the country to 21. This shows you all of the cases in Australia by the day that they were recorded, and it's one of the reasons that authorities are expressing some cautious optimism now. A slowing of the rate of growth is a good sign, but it's worth noting that there were lower rates of testing in the past few days, and that could have an influence on how many tests were found. This day in particular saw a dramatic drop in the test results received across Australia. So we wait to see if that trend continues. But even if it does, we're still nowhere near the peak of demand on hospitals and intensive care units around the country. Globally, we've now seen more than 860,000 cases and 42,000 deaths. That number is increasing rapidly. More than 10% of all of the deaths have been recorded since yesterday morning.
Australian food exporters are being given a shot at getting their goods back on the shelves in Asia, despite the region's economic slump. The government is subsidising cargo flights so that fish, flowers, meat and dairy products still stand a chance of hanging on in regional markets. Greg Jennett is at Parliament House in Canberra.
Just because borders are closing on people doesn't mean hatches aren't still open. When perishable passengers that don't need a seat have to get to Asia in a hurry. Grabbing an affordable fare's almost impossible these days.
Freight costs have been smashed. They have gone through the roof.
Demand for Australia's fresh exports that normally leave in passenger jets is there. Even though the flights are not. The government's answer? Air freight subsidies worth around $110 million.
It will not pay for all of it. Producers will still have to pay a cost, but this will reduce the cost burden.
Anything that gets a fillet on a flight's valued by smaller exporters, including Walker Seafoods in Mooloolaba.
This is a game changer for our business. This means that our business will survive.
Fish out, face masks back.
The backhaul on these flights will absolutely be medical supplies, pharmaceuticals.
Trade, no matter how slow, is a two-way exchange. And the red-hot currency these days is sterile plastic and paper.
We are aiming to resolve the extreme shortage of personal protective equipment.
Using his iron ore trade ties, Twiggy Forrest's got his hands on 90 tonnes of supplies to be flown in from China, starting tonight.
1 million N95 face masks, 2.3 million medical grade gloves, 100,000 nasal swabs.
His foundation will work with governments on distribution and sale of a haul said to be worth $160 million. Products so scarce, Border Force is now adding banned mask exports to the national stockpile. The same agencies also intercepted close to 1 million substandard Chinese masks at the border. By this week's standards, today's policy responses were modest, but that's only because this week started with that $130 billion JobKeeper package. And the Prime Minister's tonight announced he'll have Parliament recalled here next Wednesday to pass it into law. Greg Jennett, ABC News, Canberra.
Petrol stations are being accused of price gouging, even though the cost of oil has plummeted due to the coronavirus crisis. But that might be about to change. The more people stay at home, the less demand there is for petrol, and experts say that should lead soon to lower prices.
In Sydney, getting fuel without planning ahead could leave you up to $40 worse off. People going to this petrol station in Edgecliff were paying about $1.50 a litre. Prices in Ryde were much closer to the average, which is less than 90 cents.
You might see a gap of 60 cents a litre on the same block. Clearly, there's something wrong here.
Definitely not happy, especially that I'm driving every day. Can't see myself making too much of a saving.
The drop in oil prices has already been passed on to drivers in Adelaide, but in New South Wales it is a different story.
The retailers are trying to lock in their profit margins, as simple as that.
Dr Lorian DeMello from Macquarie University says petrol companies won't be able to sustain high prices.
People are driving less, so it makes sense. There's going to be less demand for fuel.
He says a lack of demand coupled with an oversupply of product should force prices to come down in about 2 weeks. But for some, patience was waning.
This is not the time to be holding on to profit margins. We know where the price should be. We're nowhere near that, and we need to see these falls happening now.
But with little regulation, those looking for the right price are still being urged to shop around. Kathleen Ferguson, ABC News, Sydney.
The childcare sector says it's facing a crisis like never before as people withdraw their children in droves. Parents are pulling their kids out after losing their jobs or because they're working from home. But anyone thinking of giving up childcare places is being urged to hold off until Friday, when the National Cabinet is expected to decide on a relief package. National Education and Parenting reporter Connor Duffy explains.
There can still be a net gain from financial loss.
The good thing that came from this is I'm spending a lot of time with them. And they put a smile on my face every day.
You're getting the weeds out?
Like so many other parents, Danny Asioli now works from home.
Red velvet cupcakes, is it yummy?
He's keeping his kids Ella and Quinn home from daycare because his wife has asthma. But Danny's still paying for it, despite his wage being slashed.
It's taking about between 40 and 50% of our income.
That's huge.
Yeah, it's really big.
Ella and Quinn now learn in their lounge room, but their parents are desperate not to lose their childcare spots.
They have friends in there, but every week becoming more and more difficult to keep it.
How much longer can you hang on for?
I would say a week maximum.
At this centre in Melbourne, only a third of the usual number of kids are turning up. That has childcare workers concerned.
At some point, some services won't come through the other end of this if we don't get some support.
Katrina Burgess doesn't know how she'll keep the doors open for the children of healthcare staff and other essential workers.
Every day is changing for us, so we don't know the impact right now.
Already more than 600 childcare and after-school centres have shut down. The industry says maintaining its $8.6 billion in Commonwealth subsidies, but waiving fees for parents will help it survive.
We've got 5% of services closed already, and we just think that's the tip of the iceberg, and many more won't open next week unless they're thrown a lifeline this Friday by the federal government.
Just like with schools, state and federal governments have clashed over the scope and the urgency of the assistance that's required. It's expected they'll resolve their differences at Friday's National Cabinet meeting if parents can hang on until then. Connor Duffy, ABC News.
With a cluster of cases among Qantas baggage handlers in Adelaide, we wanted to look at how long coronavirus survives on surfaces or objects like a bag. COVID-19 is spread by tiny droplets released from the nose or mouth as someone coughs. A single cough can produce up to 3,000 droplets, and one droplet can contain tens of thousands of virus cells. A study in the New England Journal of Medicine found that the virus can remain in the air for up to 3 hours. But once it's landed on a surface, it survives for longer. On cardboard, that can be 24 hours. On harder surfaces, such as a kitchen bench, it could last 48 or even 72 hours. But the virus starts degrading straight away on plastic. For example, half of it is likely to disappear in just under 7 hours. If you disinfect a surface, coronavirus can be eradicated within a minute. It's important to remember that just touching a surface that's contaminated with coronavirus won't make you sick. It's only if you then touch your face that the cells enter the body through your eyes, nose or mouth. And researchers say that's why wearing gloves could actually do more harm than good. That's because the virus can survive on fabrics like clothing or gloves for 24 hours. If you then touch your face with those gloves, you'll still transfer the virus. And you can't wash gloves as regularly as you can wash your hands. So the best way to stay safe is still washing your hands on a regular basis, no matter what you've touched. Still to come this hour, the toll that social distancing takes on grandparents.
Who's that? It's sad because you don't have the physical contact and the cuddles.
I can talk to them through the window. I can talk to them through the car window. You know, we can basically look at each other but not touch.
Plus, Dr. Norman Swan answers your questions. That's coming up.
The Trump administration is predicting up to 240,000 Americans could die from coronavirus, even if social distancing is maintained. The US has the highest number of cases in the world, with more than 180,000 people infected. The death toll has now surpassed China's, and for the first time, more than 800 people have died in the past 24 hours. North America correspondent Catherine Diss reports.
This field hospital in Central Park will start taking patients today in a desperate effort to relieve New York's besieged hospitals.
We have a lot of experience in fast deployment, but we never imagined that we would need to be doing it in the United States.
This is the worst hit state in a country where cases are nearing 200,000. With the peak expected within weeks, the gravity of the situation now weighing on the president.
It's a matter of life and death, frankly. It's a matter of life and death.
Critical medical supplies are running low, and hospitals are now relying on volunteers to sew much-needed face masks.
I ordered a sewing machine online and got to YouTube videos and taught myself how to sew, and then taught myself how to sew masks.
Ginny Phillips has picked up the needle and thread after 40 years.
And I was able to make 8 within a week of going from not sewing at all. And now I'm at the point where I could probably sew 10 a day.
The White House says between 100 and 240,000 Americans could die if people don't do everything they can to stop the spread of the virus. But those measures will continue to hurt the economy. The Federal Reserve now expects 47 million people will lose their jobs.
I want every American to be prepared for the hard days that lie ahead. We're going to go through a very tough 2 weeks.
How many have ever been here?
But in some parts of the country, churchgoers continue to defy the rules. This pastor has been arrested and charged. Across the nation's capital, shops have boarded up their windows, anticipating civil unrest. 3 out of 4 Americans are now under some form of lockdown. But gun shops are reopening after a court ruled they're an essential service. Catherine Diss, ABC News, Washington.
While the United States has the highest number of cases in the world, Italy still has the worst death toll. 837 people have died there in the past 24 hours, taking the total toll to almost 12,500. There are now more than 100,000 cases in the country. Spain has recorded a new daily record of 849 deaths as a second temporary morgue is set up in Madrid. Nearly 500 people have died in France over the past 24 hours. That's the largest daily increase there since the outbreak began. The country's healthcare system is so overwhelmed that it's sending some patients to Germany for treatment. And there's been a sharp increase in deaths in the UK. Almost 400 people have died over the past 24 hours, including a 13-year-old boy in London. In Indonesia, the government's been warned the coronavirus death toll could top 140,000 unless urgent measures are taken. But many Indonesians are already struggling to deal with the dead, and tensions have spilled over in some areas, with villagers rejecting the bodies of those who've been infected. Indonesia correspondent Anne Barker reports, and a warning, this story contains some distressing images.
A family mourns the death of a young woman, almost certainly a victim of coronavirus. Hospital staff returned her body wrapped in plastic to prevent infection. But in keeping with Islamic tradition, family members removed the wrapping to prepare her for burial, oblivious to the risk. Tensions have erupted in some areas where villagers are rejecting bodies for burial. But experts say Indonesia faces a vastly higher death toll within weeks if it fails to impose much tougher measures to curb the spread of the virus. The official number of dead is 136 and more than 1,500 ill, half of them in the capital. A report prepared for the government estimates that under current restrictions there could still be 144,000 deaths by the end of this month. Tougher measures to enforce social distancing could save nearly 100,000 lives, while extreme restrictions, including a lockdown, would reduce the death toll further to about 12,000. The government has flagged measures to restrict the movement of people, but it's stopped short of a ban, even as thousands abandoned Jakarta for their home villages ahead of the fasting month of Ramadan.
Please postpone your homecoming because the virus will be carried to the villages. Humans take it with them.
Instead, the president has rolled out billions of dollars in welfare spending and tax relief to help the poor and vulnerable. It might protect their incomes, but it may not save lives. Anne Barker, ABC News.
The company that owns the Ruby Princess cruise ship, which is linked to hundreds of cases of coronavirus, has defended its refusal to return to its home port. Carnival Australia issued a video statement saying the ship needs to stay close to Sydney in case any more of its 1,000 crew members need urgent medical care.
It is also very distressing to know that COVID-19 has impacted people who travel with us and their families in such a devastating way. However, it is difficult for people and businesses who derive their livelihood and jobs from cruising to see it demonised in the way it has been and for its contribution to be discounted and devalued. It simply wasn't safe for Ruby Princess to sail away from Australia and away from healthcare services that might become urgently needed. We are doing everything we can to repatriate crew back to their homes, other than those who are needed for the safe operation of our ships.
Sydney car parks are filling up with unused taxis as more people choose to stay home. Drivers are handing back their plates because they can't earn enough to stay on the road.
It's the latest sign of a stalled economy. Almost 80 cabs have been parked here because of coronavirus. Amir Mohammed has been making $50 a day. It's not enough to cover his costs.
Probably this is my last week.
What are you going to do?
No idea. Everyone is going towards the Centrelink or things welfare because I'm not surviving, I'm not making anything.
Help is available, but it can be hard to find.
People are swimming in a lot of information. What they need is clarity at the moment. They need single focused advice.
The industry wants the government to do more.
So what we need is help for operators to have the vehicles on the road, a reduction from the New South Wales government in CTP cost. We also need to ensure the federal government stimulus package helps all people within the industry, licence owners who are self-funded retirees, networks, operators and drivers.
But some still feel left out.
We got no voice. Really hurting and upsetting and very stressful moment because nobody to talk to.
As the coronavirus crisis continues to drag on, the industry is bracing for a rough road ahead. Matt Bamford, ABC News, Sydney.
In finance, the local share market produced a strong rise, recovering all of yesterday's decline. Here's Alan Kohler.
The market doesn't do anything small these days. Before coronavirus, a 1% move in a day was a big deal. Now it needs to be 3% to get our attention, which is what it was today, 3.5% actually, including some huge moves by Beach Petroleum and other energy stocks, Vicinity Centres, Boral, Challenger Financial and REA Group. Many investors seem to have decided that March 23rd was the bottom. Since the intraday low on that day, the All Ordinaries Index has gone up 20%, which is as powerful a bear market rally as you're ever likely to see, if that's what it is. That is, a rally within a bear market, or is it the start of a new bull market? No one knows, including the Reserve Bank Board, although they do think it's going to be bad for a while, which is why they cut the cash rate to 0.25% a month ago. The minutes of that meeting were released today. They thought Australia would experience a very material contraction in activity during the March and June quarters, and potentially longer. House prices for March also arrived today. More gains, especially in Sydney. But it's academic now. The only question from here is whether listings dry up as quickly as demand does, or whether there's a lot of distressed sales now. But since most of the banks have said they'll freeze repayments for up to 6 months, maybe not. Energy stocks went up strongly today, even though the oil price fell again, so obviously investors are betting that it won't stay down for long. Global markets were generally weaker, and the Australian dollar slipped back a bit, and that's finance.
A teenager is using his time in isolation to help others by hosting free teddy bear making workshops online. Campbell Remis has previously received international attention for making a bear a day for children in hospital.
Tasmanian teenager Campbell Remis has been making teddy bears since he was 9 years old. He donates them to children in hospital or sells them to raise money for charity. Now in self-isolation, the 16-year-old is putting his self-taught skills to good use.
It's not going to be quick, but I'm going to do a couple of sessions of bear making.
When he's not doing online schoolwork, Campbell is running his own social media classes from his sewing room, keeping others company and teaching them how to make teddy bears from scratch.
I said, "Mum, come down here. You can control the camera, and I'll do the bear making. You can read the comments out." And yeah, I just thought it was a good idea to get kids involved with something over the lockdown quarantine period.
Campbell's family went into lockdown almost a month ago. His mum has Parkinson's disease and some siblings have severe allergies.
Half of us were really high risk, and it wasn't like for any of us, it just wasn't worth even risking it. So it just got to a point where it's just like, no, I'm out. I don't want to play this game.
The family is instead playing its own games at home. They've set up an obstacle course in their front yard to stay active and are making kids' news bulletins and commercials, which Campbell is filming and editing.
It's awful watching what's happening outside, but inside our yard, inside our house, everything's been actually really fun.
I like lockdown in some ways, but the others I don't, but it's good. We're staying safe, that's the main thing.
As for Campbell's advice to other kids in lockdown,
just have fun pretty much.
The young bear maker plans to donate the bears he makes while in self-isolation to emergency service workers as a thank you. Monica Champ, ABC News.
Weather now, and New South Wales can expect widespread rain and thunderstorms over the next few days, followed by the first serious cold snap of the year. In Sydney today, it was overcast and warm with a top of 24. Overnight lows were above average due to high humidity and cloud cover. There was some rain and scattered thunderstorms in the far west and isolated showers about the coast. Daytime temps above average in the east, tending a little below average in the west. In the capitals, showers for Melbourne and Adelaide, a top of 30 in Brisbane. A low pressure trough will cause rain and thunderstorms over a large part of New South Wales for the rest of the week. A pool of cold air will reach us by the weekend, leading to a big drop in temperatures overnight on Saturday. A wet day for Canberra, Hobart and Melbourne tomorrow, mainly sunny in Adelaide. Around New South Wales tomorrow, we'll see the start of several days of widespread rain and scattered storms. Many parts will receive 10 to 20 millimetres by Sunday, but some areas affected by thunderstorms will pick up around 50 millimetres. Some locally heavy falls are possible tomorrow over the central and southwest ranges and slopes. A strong wind warning has been issued for the Hunter, Illawarra, Batemans and Eden areas. Inland, the far southwest is the only area forecast to be dry. Winds on Sydney waters strong northeasterly up to 30 knots. In Sydney tomorrow, a wet and windy day with falls between 5 and 15 millimetres. The sun will rise at 7:07 a.m. And over the next few days, that wet weather will stay with us for a couple of days. Falls will be increasing on Friday, a possible early storm on Saturday, then clearing for a sunny Sunday. 7:30 is next.